It's 14 away from 9 o'clock. I'm afraid we need to talk about some money. Money you don't have at the moment for most South Africans. You should prepare yourself for another interest rate hike. I'm afraid experts are predicting an increase of 50 basis points. Now, it's been steadily increasing since the beginning of last year. Let's get the bad news. Maybe there's a glimmer of hope. I'm not sure. I don't want to line up Annabel Bishop for failure. Annabel, good morning. Investec chief economist with us this morning. So you agree, disagree? 50 basis points? That's what we're going to hear?
Yes, that's our expectation. We think that the South African Reserve Bank would really look to choose between 25 to up to 75 basis points, but we think it'll probably settle in the middle at 50.
Can I ask just for basic economist lingo for a second, because I think people still don't necessarily understand the interest rate versus inflation and SARB's inflation band of between 3 and 6%. Why are we trying to measure and manage these two measurements, interest and inflation?
So inflation is really the rate at which prices change on a year-on-year basis. What is a basket of prices that the consumer faces, whether it's food or services, compared to last year, and that year-on-year measures the inflation rate. For interest rates, obviously, the South African Reserve Bank increases or lowers them in order to reduce demand for goods and services, which in turn then has a subduing effect on inflation. And the Reserve Bank tries to get inflation within the 3 to 6% target range. Really, it's aiming for 4.5%. So that's where we sit at the moment in South Africa. The inflation rate, however, is at 7.1%. So you can see it's very far removed from this 4.5% that the Reserve Bank is seeking to achieve.
And do we get a sense that this has been a knee-jerk reaction by SARB off the back of what we've seen geopolitically with the comments made by the US ambassador to SA and also other comments on a geopolitical basis? Has this been a knee-jerk reaction, or has this been well measured, do you think?
It's been a measured interest rate hike trajectory really since not even last year, but the year before, since November 2021. That is how long we've been hiking interest rates for. We started off at 25 basis points and then we eventually moved to 50 basis point hikes. So it's been a very measured approach. The geopolitical risks you're talking about, the concerns about South Africa potentially being involved in supplying Russia with weaponry, that obviously did create some negative sentiment in global financial markets. We know that the bulk of global financial market activity is in the Western Hemisphere, and from that reason, that's why we obviously saw some negative sentiment to South Africa, and we saw the rand weaken somewhat, moving from from around 1850 to 1950 as a consequence of that. But let's actually look back to April last year. And in April last year, the rand was actually at 1450, and that long, slow, depreciation of the rand, well, quick at some times, but certainly, up to above 19 rand to the dollar recently, has really been a consequence of the fact that South Africa has been hiking its interest rates by less than the United States, and of course, with a less of an interest rate hike than is occurring in the US. From a quantum perspective, that's actually contributed to some rand weakness.
How much worse do you think this could get? Right now, the expectation, as you say, 50 basis points. It could have been 75 basis points. But how much worse could it get this year? How many more hikes do you think, or are we at the end of a hike cycle? Because let's be honest, consumers, of course, we absorb the hikes, but it's going to reach a point where it's just not sustainable.
Well, consumers obviously are battling, and if we look globally as well as domestically, there is subdued consumer demand. But if we have a look at the interest rate hike cycles internationally, we can see that the United States is expected to have paused its interest rates now, the last hike in the current cycle potentially in May. And South Africa may do the same, or we may see one more hike, but we do think the second half of this year, towards the end of the year, could start to see interest rate cuts.